Welcome back to Shit Talk Fridays. I'm Jeanna.
And I'm Ivo.
And let's drink because happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Jeanna.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And we ain't drinking nothing special.
Yeah.
We didn't even want to announce it because it ain't special. But let's drink.
Good shit.
All right, so let's get into our topic for tonight, marriage regrets. One of the reasons why we decided to talk about this was because we noticed that it's trending a lot on social. A lot of people on social media are saying that there is no value in getting married. So we wanted to talk a little bit about like marriage and some of those questions that surround it to maybe see if we could give a little bit of insight. It's just our opinion based on our experience, considering that Ivo and I have been married happily for 12 years. We've been together for 17 and I've actually known him for 22 years.
We have a little bit to say on the subject.
Right?
Yeah.
We're not experts by any means.
By any means.
But I think hopefully maybe we could give people a little bit of insight into what we think marriage can be. And then we'll talk a little bit about actual weddings. That may be a little bit fun. So the first question that I have for you tonight is, what constitutes two people to get married?
You know, that's a great question.
Thank you, sir.
And the short answer is, does anybody really know? The reason I say so is, for everybody, what constitutes getting married is different. You know, what the reasons why I would get married is definitely probably not the reasons why someone else would get married.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of the reasons that I would get married are probably reasons that some people would agree that those are valid reasons to get married. So I wouldn't say that there's a one answer fits all type of response to that question, but for me, I fell into that cliche of just when you know, you know. And the reason that was so is because I was fortunate enough at a very young age to have a very meaningful relationship that didn't last. And the takeaway from that relationship was that I wanted to be in that feeling, in that relationship, for the rest of my life. Prior to that, everything that I thought was a great relationship really couldn't compare. And everything following that relationship never really measured up. I kind of like went on this quest to try to recreate that feeling, that space that I was in, and failed many, many, many times. But I always was willing to take that risk because I felt the reward was that great for me. I got to taste something that I knew was full of, for me, it was full of depth. There was just so much substance to that in comparison to all my other experiences. So when I met you, you were the first thing in a very long time that made me feel that way again. And it was like I knew that I had finally arrived to that, something that I was actually kind of starting to give up on, because I think I went through 4 serious relationships,
Mm-hmm.
really trying to find that again. And once I was with you, it was the beginning of something that I felt was okay. This has the potential to be part of the rest of my life. And so then, obviously we're still here together now, but that was how I chose to pursue and continue our relationship and develop it to see where it went. And we obviously grew in many aspects after that, but the fact of the matter is, I just knew again, because I wanted to be in that moment for the rest of my life when I was a kid, that when we met and our feelings developed towards each other, I knew I wanted to be there and I didn't want to be anywhere else ever again. Like, this was it for me. And so my cliche, I live in that. Yeah. Well, I got to, that whole, what's funny is that.
So give it to me in a nutshell. Like, if you were to say to somebody, this is one of the reasons why I think you should get married, you would say, if you know, you know?
No. Well, what's funny is that I was just about to tell you this. That's exactly what I was about to say. People have said that to me. what I've spoken to people in the past about how did you guys know that you were the one for each other? How did you know that your relationship was worth getting married?
Mm-hmm.
How did you know you wanted to take it to the next step? And many times I've heard, I just knew. And I'm like, what? How do you just know? And so fortunately I got to experience that. But for somebody who hasn't experienced it, I would say what constitutes getting married is finding a partner that is willing to build something with you that is meaningful and has depth. And when I say that, I mean like something that's going to last for years. Something that I'm actually having a difficult time coming up with what I would say to somebody, because typically I tell that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a hard time giving people advice on things that I don't have real life experience in. So because I don't have real life experience in knowing what constitutes a marriage outside of what it constituted for me,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little difficult for me to give somebody some advice that is outside of what I know.
Okay. I think that it's fair for you to say that the only advice you could give is based on your own personal experience. I don't think that is lacking advice. I think, what you are saying, Ivo, may not fit for everyone. There are people that may see what constitutes two people getting married very differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. I would say that when I think about that, the first thing that comes to mind is not something like when you know.
Right.
I knew that I wanted to marry you, but that wasn't my immediate thought when I said this is the man that I want to marry. It was the fact that I knew who you were as a person. I felt like I had experienced you on all levels. And based on all of those levels that I had experienced you on, I knew that there was longevity in us. So that would be the advice that I would give someone if they were to ask me, hey, I'm looking to get married. What do you think? Do you think that this is and I would say, do you feel like you know your partner on all levels?
See, that's the funny thing, right? Is that that's a very legitimate answer, and it almost sounds like a textbook. And when I
Really?
no when I say textbook, I feel like you could look that up as the definition of what you should look for in someone that you're going to marry. My thing is that early on, in the very early feelings of us being together, I already felt that. Like, it was almost premature. There was just something about the connection between us that was just so reminiscent of something that I knew before, that I just knew I had arrived.
Okay, so like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. What you're saying, I don't think lacks advice. It's just really solely based on your experience.
It's like I tell many people, I said, I knew because you made me feel like I was a kid again. You made me feel like I was 16.
Yeah, well, as there have been times I've asked people why they're getting married, and I had one guy tell me it's because she puts up with my shit. And I remember just being like,
I've heard that before.
Well, you were with me when this person said that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I remember just being like, okay. Well, good luck on that, sir.
Yeah.
I just remember being so kind of taken back by that. Like, that's why somebody was choosing to make this commitment. And then the last thing I'm going to say is, I would, and this is again just my personal opinion, I would really hope that you were truly in love. And whatever true love means for every person individually is going to be different. But I knew that I was truly in love with you, and how I knew that, and I guess maybe one of the ways that other people can gauge it is when you get into something that is really heavy, that the thought comes to your mind of, ooh, I could potentially walk away from this right now. And then you feel this like pull to this man or to this woman that is overriding that feeling of anger, of frustration, that is saying, okay, yes, these are the feelings that I'm having right now. But man, this love that I've had for X amount of time is like superseding that. That's how I felt when it came to you. And I think that to me is like one of the two true definitions of love, is when you feel that overwhelming feeling to want to continue to be with that person and care for them and support them even through the hardest times. And even when that man or that woman that you're in a relationship with is maybe not in the best state of their life, because you know that happens. And like, that's how I knew.
I feel like that's a little harder for men. As you're saying this, I'm thinking about like all the men that I knew growing up, and how in a situation like that, it takes a very emotionally mature person to, in a state like that, really pull back and be drawn in due to love. As to where a lot of men they're very destructive in relationships and are more likely to hit the fucking self-destruct button.
Yeah, I think you actually want to hit the self-destruct button a couple of times. Yeah. Matter of fact, I actually think Ivo did self-destruct a couple of times.
I did in many ways, yeah, for sure.
I think Ivo actually, you were in the pilot seat and you fucking hit each other.
Yeah, I was quick. I mean, I'm speaking kind of from self-experience in the beginning of
that was a long time ago. By the way,
it was a very long time ago.
Yeah,
I was very short-fused and very kind of difficult time dealing with my anger. And so I was really quick to say fuck everything,
Yeah.
Fuck this, I don't give a fuck. And that was my answer to solving all my problems. I don't give a fuck it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember those days. Funny story though. I'm actually kind of like that now. I'm actually the one that's a little bit more volatile now. We have definitely switched seats. Not the same, but I've definitely leveled up in that area, and that's something that I'm working on.
I think it's a lot due to the fact that I've kind of like found myself where I can. You
found your zen, Ivo.
I found my zen. I don't find it necessary to hit the the red button and pick up the red phone and call the commissioner every single time things get a little heated. And so I'm very more willing to be like, yeah, all right, whatever. And so I think now you have the room and the space to kind of like sometimes get a little hot and it really not mean anything.
Yeah. All right, so then let's move on to the next question. What makes a good marriage, Ivo? As you sip your drink.
A lot of alcohol. It's like, no, I'm joking. I am kidding. What makes a good marriage? I think that what makes a good marriage is two people getting together, bringing the best of them into one space, and collectively agreeing on their life journeys and agreeing to take that journey together and help each other in any which way whatsoever that they can to complete all of the goals that they want to achieve throughout that journey.
How do you bring the best of yourself? How would you give that advice?
A lot of self-reflection, a lot of humility, a lot of deflated ego. And I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah.
I had a very, very big ego when I was younger, and it took letting go of that ego to be able to look at somebody in the mirror for who they truly were. An ego will really blind a person, or definitely blinded me, from seeing parts of me that were very valuable. I identified my ego as an ugly part of me. It helped me in many ways, to like kind of march out in front of things and take charge, but it was also destructive in a lot of relationships, the ego. And so in that aspect, being able to set my ego aside helped me fully see myself as a person and all my flaws, and and I was able to work and develop those for the better throughout time. And it was a continual effort of me working on myself and trying to be a better person so that I can be a better person to you.
It's interesting that you say that, because that's actually what I was going to say.
Really?
Yeah. I think what makes a good marriage is... I think what makes a good marriage is a person's willingness to release their ego for the betterment of and longevity and strength of the relationship. And I speak from my own personal experience. My ego was my survival strategy for a long time. And in the long haul of our relationship, I had to stop defending myself. And maybe people may be confused by that when I say that. There were times when we got into arguments that I felt like I needed to defend myself against you. And I wasn't realizing that in an argument, you must seek a solution. It's not about defending yourself when you're in a relationship, a loving relationship, you know. Mm-hmm. I can understand if maybe it's a relationship that is not healthy and you almost feel like you need to defend yourself because then you may get taken advantage of. But that's not the case between you and I. But I was still going into a lot of our arguments and a lot of our disputes, or just even, you know, everyday things around the house that needed to be done. My ego was always stepping forward. So I would say my recommendation is your willingness to let go of your ego. And I know that that is not easy, and it ties into what you said. It is your ability to self-reflect and say, this is actually toxic to my relationship. Yep. I think your ego can serve a great purpose outside of your relationship. Absolutely. You know, because let's be for real. When people step outside into the real world, more than likely, no one is meeting the real you. They're meeting your ego.
Yes, they are.
So with that being said, when you come home to your significant other, releasing that and them just let them just always seeing you in that vulnerable state, I think could really be a great recipe for a blissful marriage.
Well, giving credit to where credit is due, your attitude and your ability to keep your ego under management was something that I eventually emulated. When it was time for me, when I reached that moment where I was able to identify myself as having an ego that needed some management, the question came up where, all right, how do I manage it? What do I do? What do I even do with this? You know? And I was able to look to you in the way that you able to manage yourself in situations like that, and then apply those to my situations and build off of that.
You know what is so interesting? As you say that, I literally just had a revelation. You know how I was just saying that now in our relationship, I'm the one that sometimes has a little bit more of an issue? Mm-hmm. I just realized why.
Why is that? Have I taken all of your ego management?
No, it's not that. So in the beginning of our relationship, where you were, I guess, a little bit more explosive and you had less control of your ego, and that's what was always stepping forward. And because I had so much control of it, it actually made me feel kind of powerful. It made me say, this guy is off his meat rocker right now.
I can see that.
And I'm so like in my zen right now. I'm letting him go off to show him how great this is. So in actuality, my ego was still kind of there. So now you have found that. And I think sometimes it makes me so angry.
Oh, shit. Yeah. I'm using your own weapon against you. Is that what it is?
Yeah, because you're just so like, yeah, no, Jeanna. Yeah. And I'm like, fucking motherfucker.
I finally understood the power behind it. And it's great. It's great sometimes where I could just, I'm like, all right, sure, whatever. Like when sometimes I can recognize these things as typical. I can think back and like, yo, this thing in the past would fucking piss me the fuck off. Yeah. And be thinking about it now like this shit is nothing.
It's nothing.
It's nothing.
This
shit is nothing.
So I literally just had that. Like I just had that aha moment right now. Ladies and gentlemen, you just saw that live. This is like, it is such a testament to what we're saying about
Right.
letting go of the ego, because as we're sitting here talking, I'm just so open to what you're saying that I'm like, fuck, that's it right there. So interesting. All right, so I got damn. So what do you think is too soon to get married, Ivo?
I kind of feel bad for saying this because I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to fall outside of this timeline that I'm about to say.
Okay.
But this is just my opinion and not to set a standard for how other people should live their lives. I feel that anything under 2 years is too soon to get married. And the reason I say so is because for me, relationships, they go in phases. And they start with an infatuation phase, which typically lasts about a year, and then they move on to the getting to really know each other phase. And I feel that after that second year, you have some significant time behind you where you can look back and evaluate the person that you've got to know over the last 2 years. Something may have developed in that time where you feel like that this is the one. That is possible. It's definitely happened in shorter time for a lot of people. But for me, that's just scratching the surface. I feel that even after 2 years is when I would need that time to really start thinking about, is there something really here? Is there something that will develop after these 2 years? Are we still growing after the 2 years, or did we stagnate already? And this relationship is just kind of, we're just in each other's spaces, because that can happen real quick too. When you have people, they go through the infatuation phase. Second year, they get to know each other. The third year, everything is just chill. Like there's no growth. There's no, developments. They're just two people in a relationship kind of going through the motions of life.
That's interesting.
And then, yeah. And so for me, I need to know in that third year, after we've done this, after we passed the 2 years, is there a future? Like,
and you're obviously speaking directly from experience, because you proposed to me on year 3.
Yeah, at the end of year 3, yeah.
Yeah, at the end of year 3, and we actually didn't get married until year 5, like 18 months out from that. I was in no rush to get married. Actually, you know what, Ivo?
Ever did.
To be honest, when I say that, it wasn't that I wasn't in a rush to get married. I wasn't in a rush to have a wedding.
Right. That was it. We got engaged.
Like, I wanted to get married, but like I was in no rush to have a wedding. We had difference of opinion as far as like a wedding. We had to like figure out how we wanted to go about doing that. But it was like not like a rush thing where I was like, 6 months we need to get married.
Yeah, that's a whole nother, I think, episode that we could talk about. The amount of time that one should have between getting engaged and actually getting married, and what's too long and what's too fast. But
so I would definitely agree with you. I think 2 years is definitely, anything under 2 years is definitely too soon. And I'm just basing this off of personal experience. I got pregnant after being with the father of my son. We were together 6 months.
Wow.
I met him
0 to 60 real
I
quick.
met him on Mother's Day of 1996. I got pregnant that October on Halloween.
Wow.
1996. Gave birth to our first son that following year.
I can't imagine what that's like at such a young age.
So, I mean, that is not like marriage. It's different. But I put myself in a position where I now had to make a lifetime commitment.
Yeah.
This man was going to be the father of this boy for the rest of his life unless he passed on. Right? I did not know who he was.
Yeah.
In the least.
No possible way. Yeah.
And let me tell you, the next 2 years after, having my first son was rough. So I'm just reflecting upon my own experience,
And even at that age, like,
I was as a fucking kid.
The both of you, like, you're not even really fully developed as people.
No.
Like, there's just so much personality changes that come after that age that you still could, even if you spent another 2 years together, to getting to know each other, there would still be so much more growth. Like, that's a hard.
And listen, I know people that got together young and they're still together, and kudos to them. And I'm not saying, but I think 2 years for anybody that is entering something is a great foundation to start with. That's just it.
I say this because I kind of touching back on the whole experience that I had when I was young, all the relationships that followed after, I kind of rushed into it thinking that I could replicate that situation that I was in. And so what my takeaway from those was to take your time, get to know the person, allow for natural things to develop and occur on their own, give some time for things to become organic, because that's kind of the space that I found that works best for me. And so after some trial and error, I found that 2 years was a good number for me.
Yeah, my next relationship after that lasted about 2 years, and then we separated after 2 years.
See that?
And at like right around that 2 year mark, I was like, nah, this ain't it, fam.
This ain't it. Yeah, something happens.
This ain't it, fam.
And it's like after that, like that yearly anniversary, it's like the turn of a new leaf. It's something that and what was so funny about that relationship? That person and I remained friends and stood in contact even after you and I were together. And I received a phone call from that person when they were looking to get married to someone. And do you remember that phone call? I think I do.
There was like a huge time difference. So when they called, it was like early morning.
Now I know.
Yeah, okay. So right. So exactly, they were talking to me and they're like, I want to get married to this girl. And I'm like, really? Like, tell me about her. Like, what do you see in her? And I remember him just saying to me, I just want to get married to her. Like I'm like, she's the one. And I'm like, well, how long have you known her? And I think at this point it was like 9 months. I was like, man, I think it's too soon, but I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but it just sounds like you're really in lust right now, and you're like like you're really infatuated right now. But listen, by all means, if you feel like she's the one, then go ahead. I actually said something in addition to that I don't know. I felt like at that time she saw him as an in to a new life.
That happens. That happens a lot.
And they wind up getting like divorced like 2 years after that. I don't even know if it was 2 years. It may have been like 18 months or something like that.
Did you call that one too?
That one was an interesting situation. And the reason why Ivo is saying that I call that, because there's been many times we've watched people get married and I kind of project how long they're going to stay together. And it's a lot of times come to fruition.
It's eerily kind of like scary.
Yeah, it's actually kind of correct. So now that we talked about what's too soon, what do you think is too long?
Well, too long is right as anything after, like between 4 to 5 years.
Okay, so if someone has been with a man or a woman 4 to 5 years and there's no even any talk of marriage and making that commitment, you're saying that if it's too long, would you say at that point the man or the woman maybe reflect upon that relationship and see maybe if they want to get married, or if it's maybe time to end the relationship?
Yeah, when I say marriage, and when we talk about marriage, we're not necessarily saying like go out and stand in front of a judge or get married by law. I'm saying that after between 4 and 5 years of getting to know someone, I think that's a solid amount of time to be able to look back and decide whether this is the person that you want to spend the rest of your life developing your future with. Whether it just be a like a common, like after 8 years together, it's like common law, you get like you're married.
I think it's actually 10 years.
10 years,
but
you know what I mean, like,
yeah.
Or whether you just have a meaningful conversation with that person and say, hey, I don't really, not into the whole marriage thing, but you're it for me. You know, and I want you to know that. You know, I think something like that should happen at that point where there's an agreement. You know, there's a mutual understanding that even though either we do get married or we don't get married, that we're on the same level to know that we're in this together. And, you know, we're going to be committed to each other. And not just be like kind of just going through the motions like I mentioned before. You know, I think that if two people are in a relationship and after like 3 or 4 years together, going on 5 years, there's been no real conversation about what their future looks like, and it's just kind of like they're just going about day in and day out, working, you know, going out to dinner, eating, blah blah blah, and just with kind of aimlessly going through their life within a relationship. I think that there's something wrong there. I think somebody's got commitment issues or something like that.
I was gonna say like 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
And the only reason why I add like an additional 2 years is if you start maybe dating this person when you're young, and the two of you are just kind of growing. Whereas maybe if you meet this person when you're 30, maybe 5 years.
Yeah.
But if you meet this person when you're 22, maybe 7 years is fine.
See, when you're 30 though, right?
You feel me? Like, I think it's very relative potentially to the age, but that's why I'm going to say 5 to 7 years. I think once you hit that 7-year mark, it's like the question of commitment in the marriage aspect should definitely be spoken about.
You know, when a person gets older, specifically women, when they get into their later years, 30, 35, don't they like start to be concerned about their whole ability to have children at a young age and so on and so forth? So like so spending that much time to get to know somebody and be in a relationship may seem a little long, because it's like women feel like they're on a time clock at some point.
I mean, listen, if we're gonna talk about nature, women definitely do have a ideal time span to have children. Not to say that you couldn't have them in your later years, in your later 30s. Many women are doing that now, but for the most part, the ideal, you know, time is obviously when you're like later 20s, earlier 30s. And speaking from experience, I've had a child in my teenage years, in my 20s, and in my 30s, and man, the way that I felt after having a kid at 30 was so different from the way that I felt after having a kid at 20. The fucking bounce back was not it. So do I think that it may be actually a little bit harder? Yes. So maybe women may be looking at it like, ooh, maybe this is kind of crunch time for me.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that.
So like 7 years might be a little much for somebody who's 35.
I'm just saying, if you meet when you're young, because there's some people that they meet when they're young and they stay together for a very long time. Right. You know, think about it. There's some people when they meet when they're 18. You know?
Yeah, and it works.
And it works
for them.
Even if you're young, you are, after 5 to 7 years, you should be at a decent age to maybe consider marriage. So now that we're talking about, you know, we've talked about too long, and we've talked about like what makes a good marriage and all this stuff, I just like, overall, why should people legally get married? Because, you know, the question right now everywhere is like, what's the value of getting married? So why should people legally get married?
You know, for me, I think it's so I don't think people there should be a need for people to legally get married. I think that it's important at some point in the relationship to take it beyond a dating relationship, something that symbolizes moving on to another chapter of the relationship, so that it symbolizes growth and the evolution of that union. And I think marriage or wedding or getting married, a ceremony of some sort that represents that, is important for the growth of that. It's, you know, it's an experience that the two put together, that they go through together.
Okay, so what is the value in that?
So I feel like it's bonding. It's bonding on another level.
Okay.
Now, legally getting married, I think, is important, because it really really, 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 like, legally binds the two people together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it kind of does that, like that movie situation where you cuff two people together with a knife, and like they gotta work through it. And so to me, that's important. And I say this because before we got married, you know, whenever we got into our disagreements, the ones that were really bad, you know, the thought of exiting the relationship crossed my mind, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Or not, I wouldn't say cross my mind, but it's like, what if this is it? Like, where do I go from here? You know, and kind of like almost starting to prepare those steps of what those need to be in the event that it does. You know, like planning an exit strategy. You know, and obviously that I never needed to use that exit strategy because we're still here. And I want to say a few more times before we got married, I was at that point again, like, damn, I think this is pretty bad. Like, I probably blew the fuck up and said some shit I shouldn't have said, and you know, I don't even know how I'm gonna backpedal from this shit. And fortunately, you were forgiving it enough to like to keep your ego in check and all that good stuff, and so that never really had to go there. And then I remember once we got married, the next serious issue that was going on between us, that, you know, we were really having a big disagreement, you know, automatically I started to think that again.
Mm-hmm.
But then was immediately stopped by the fact that we're married now. And there ain't no fucking walking away, at least not like that. Like, and it made the argument seem petty, believe it or not.
So would you say that the aspect of the legal document really put some shit in perspective for you?
For me, it did, yeah. Like, because here I am having a disagreement with my partner, and thinking about leaving the situation rather than working it through as I should, as two partners should. You're gonna disagree. You're not gonna see eye to eye, but longevity is really the ability to communicate and work through things and grow together is important for the longevity of the relationship. And so the fact that we were married,
mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, like, I don't know what's the best word to describe it, but it just made our argument, or the issue we're having, so minuscule now, you know, because there's like this legal tie to us that is to go through it is so much more monumental than working out the issue that we have at hand.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's almost easier to work through this
mm-hmm.
than would be to work through that, which is the separation and the divorce.
You know, Ivo, as you're saying this, one of the things that two things come to mind. Number one is, you and I both come from families where we did not see what people would say are healthy marriages.
Right.
We both come from families that there was divorce, marriage, remarriage, divorce again.
Yeah.
There was not this foundation that we saw presented in front of us as marriage is this beautiful thing and it should be kept sacred. It was just kind of like, yeah, whatever you want to do and however you want to figure it out. If you meet some girl and you want to marry her, or if you don't want to be with her. So because I came from that world of not really seeing people in my family in healthy marriages, when I decided to make that commitment to you, signing on that piece of paper, Ivo, I took that shit very serious. I am a very by the book person when it comes to those kind of things, and you know that.
Yeah.
So I looked at it as far as the legal aspect, I looked at it as almost any contractual obligation that I must meet. So when I got my first car, I had to sign. I had to pay for X amount of time. I took that shit very serious. When I needed to get student loans to go to college, I signed. I took that shit very serious. So I then had the same mindset when it came to marriage. I wanted to succeed at it. So what was it going to take to succeed? Because now this shit is locking me in, right? Yeah. And to me, what I found so interesting is that contractual feeling, you start to forget about that after a while when you start to really grow in a marriage the way that we have. And that is like one of the last thoughts that you have. Because you and I are always looking for progression now. Like, the thought of even looking to leave this marriage is an afterthought.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
And the primary thought is always like, what can we do to make this better?
Right.
Even though, regardless of all of the arguments that we have. So I think in the beginning, it helps you kind of stay in line.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people, like you said, that have commitment issues on all levels. If they can't even commit to something for themselves, whether it be maybe to like live a healthier lifestyle, to get a loan, people who bounce out of these things, they may not see the true value in that.
You know, another, this kind of just came to me, but another reason I think that it's important to get married is because we all know that story of two people that are married and happily ever after, right? And I think that for the most part, if you ever wanted to be in a relationship, there's a part of you that kind of wanted that to be what your relationship ended up being. Not necessarily like a fairy tale happily ever after, but someone that you can partner up and spend a large, if not all of the rest of your life with.
Yeah.
And I think that marriage is the stepping stone in making that happen. Marriage is the risk that you have to take to get to the reward of what many people see as the ultimate relationship. So for anybody who thinks that values that, you might want to consider marriage.
Preach, my brother. As you're saying that, I'm like looking at the clock like I'm going to make sure that gets out.
Gotta pass that message on.
So now that we've talked a lot about marriage, why you should get married, how long should it take, how long it shouldn't take, and all this other jazz. How much is too much to spend on a wedding?
Oh boy.
Why do you feel like I'm stumping you with these questions? Because just answer them.
They're loaded questions.
Yeah, but it's like I feel like you're treading lightly. Just speak to them very literally, Ivo, because I know you know what you want to say, and you're just like, oh man.
Yeah, I am treading a little lightly.
But just say it.
So, I think that going out, like anything that's outside of a budget is too much money. And anything that require
a budget that couple has set is what you're saying.
Right. So the second part of what I was going to say was that anything that requires a couple to go into debt or to spend money that they don't have on a wedding is too much money. So if your finances permit that you can spend a boatload of fucking cash on your wedding and it's just a fraction of what you have, and it's something that you can actually take out of your finances and say, I'm going to throw this at a wedding and it's not going to affect me, then by all means, do it like that. I think that is proper budgeting. If you can, but spending within your means, spending outside of your means is just too much. Like if you don't have it, don't do it, and we are examples of that. And I think that worked out great for us. And, we came up with a number. And we stuck to it.
Yeah. I
mean, hardcore.
Yeah, I went and did a little research on like what the average cost of certain things were, like what the low end and what the high end were, and I had an idea of like, or I want to say we had an idea of how we wanted our wedding to look, because when it came to large commitments, you made all of them. You picked the hall, you picked the DJ. I just sat back and was like, yeah, sure.
Well, I mean, to your defense, I had experience in that field, so I kind of took the lead.
But you even went to a the
tasting?
Yeah, you went to a tasting but it had people there that were photographers, florists, and then that's where we got a photographer from. You picked him too. We had an idea of what we wanted, and we said, okay, based on research, this is the average cost that people are spending. So based on what we have, where do we fit in this number? But we saw firsthand people spending money that they didn't have. I remember oh my God. I remember talking to one of our group friends, and they were talking about how after, I think it was like 2 years after the wedding, they were still paying down credit cards from the wedding, and they weren't even together anymore. And I remember being like, holy fuck, could you imagine having to pay a credit card payment for a wedding that you had 2 years prior and you weren't even with that person anymore?
It just wouldn't be a thought that would cross my mind.
Yeah, I just remember being like, damn, I could never imagine, if one of the things I learned from my dad was if you can't buy it with the money that you have, you can't afford it. And I remember just thinking to myself, I use that logic a lot in my life. If I couldn't financially afford something, like even if I took out a loan, because everybody does that, you get a car or whatever. If the money that I was making could not afford to pay that, and I was potentially looking to pay for it with credit, I should not be getting it.
Agreed.
So we applied that to our wedding. So I would agree with you. Anything that is going to put you into debt is too much money. And I get the draw to want to have a lavish, beautiful wedding. I totally get that. But if in the end that's all you're going to have, you're going to fucking regret that.
I mean, listen, debt, there's good debt and there's bad debt.
Yeah, but a wedding ain't it.
Yeah, exactly. To be taking out debt for a wedding that's not going to be returned, there's no return on that investment for that debt, is just stress that's been added on to a newly wed couple.
Well, we actually talked about this. One of the big financial stressors in a new marriage is wedding debt.
Yeah.
So a lot of couples are stepping into their brand new marriage with debt from their wedding.
Yeah, and then having to dig themselves out of a hole. Like, what?
And then that immediately starts to put stress on the existing relationship. Yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, if it's putting you in debt, don't do that shit.
Yeah. So, and just so you know, right? I don't want to skip ahead. What's the...
No, we're fine. I was gonna. So
yes.
Let's move on to the next question, because actually, you were saying I have a little experience in weddings. Right. So our last question, Ivo, what makes a good wedding? Let's talk about it from your experience.
So I worked in banquets for about 5 years, and so I've done weddings that are super yiny and weddings that are ginormous and extravagant. And I will be the first to tell you that some of the best weddings that I've worked at, and we can agree as a couple that some of the best weddings that we've ever been to have been on the very low end of budgets. As far as work goes, I've done weddings that had 75 people, a tiny buffet, but the energy in the room, the family that was there, the friends and family, the food that they chose, and the music that they brought to that room had that little room jumping. And when it came down to the final hour, it was all feet on the dance floor. Nobody was in their chairs, and everybody was having a great time, including me. Yeah. I was in there dancing with them. I used to get in trouble because I would be in these rooms just living in these moments. It was just electric in those rooms. Yeah. And then I've also done weddings where you've had, double buffets, double, triple ice sculptures, carving stations, and, performers and big bridal parties with the wedding, with the head tables, 10 bridesmaids and 10 groomsmen, and with the cathedral staircase that came down from the second floor, and the brides coming down looking all extravagant. And when it came down to the end of the last hour, where it's like party time, 3/4 of the people are sitting at their tables talking.
The last hour?
Yeah. So that's it's a 4 hours to 5 hours is generally what a banquet is. So the first hour is a cocktail hour. And then the second hour and the third hour are usually, and the fourth hour are like you put out the meals, and then there's dancing in between and stuff like that. But those 3 hours are generally, or 2 to 3 hours are generally where they get the food out. And then once all the food is out, then the rest of the time they clean up off the tables and it's party dance time. You know, and then there's a small time to cut the cake, and then back to dancing. So that's usually how it's structured.
Okay.
And so when in that final hour where you're expecting, all right, there's been a ton of money dumped into this wedding. Yes, like a ton of people just sitting in their chairs. Nobody's up. Nobody's dancing. It's just boredom.
Ivo, I had no voice after our wedding.
Yo, for real.
I remember we went home and we sat in our bed, in your tux and in my wedding my wedding dress, and we sat there and we read every single person's card. And I remember I could barely even read, but we were just so excited to read everybody's card, because we were just like high off of the energy of the wedding. But I will definitely concur with you on that. Yeah. The best weddings that I have ever been to are the ones that are smaller, where the energy is palpable. Yeah, and where you can feel it coming from the couple and it is radiating through the room. And everybody that is there is in tune to that shit. And everyone is there to love, support, and party for that couple. I remember one time we went to a wedding that there wasn't even like the traditional, there wasn't like the, groomsmen. It was just at a restaurant. Yeah. And they got married in City Hall, and we just were at a little restaurant. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think someone had a speaker. And I had so much fun because everybody was there talking, having a great time, dancing a little bit. There wasn't like a whole lot of space, but it was just so much fun. And at the end of the night, like I'm always going to remember that. And I hope that couple always remembers that night. I actually still have a picture from their wedding in our car of you and me, because they sent around the room a little like Polaroid camera. And I remember when the wife of that couple got in my car recently, she was like, "Oh my God, is that from?" I was like, "Yeah, man, like that was one of the best nights, being with you guys." So yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I've also been to some really big weddings where I'm just kind of like, is it over yet?
Now, that's not to take away from that there are big weddings that are amazing. Yeah. Because I've worked at those too. I feel that those big ones are generally the people who are within their means. Like they're blowing it all out, and it's not like the expenses is like a speck off the shoulder.
That shit is nothing.
It's nothing, and then there's just, so there's not that added stress of like, oh my God, so much went into this, and like we've spent so much money and things are not right. It's just like,
that's a really good point.
You know what I mean? And I feel like that those big ones are the ones where you can see that everybody's having a good time is because, it was no problem to make it that big. And I feel like that there are big ones where people really bite off more than they can chew trying to live up to something, and it ends up being a disaster. And it's like, it ends up being more show.
Oh man, listen, I am a makeup artist and I've done a lot of weddings, and man, have I seen things set on fire. Yeah, well. So I definitely agree with you on that. So that actually brings us to the end of the show. We made it.
All right.
I hope everybody has a great weekend. Shit Talk Fridays comes on every Friday. If you want to continue to watch us, to listen to us, please like, subscribe, follow, share us. Do whatever you feel like you would like to do for us that will continue to help us be able to be here for you.
Share our shit, period.
Period. But until next Friday, ladies and gentlemen.
Peace out.
Peace out.